Hello. Today, what we're doing is we're drawing some horror themed, supernatural theme, haunted themed architecture. And kind of what I was thinking with this one is to do something like a crypt, like you would see in an old Gothic city. Maybe a little Bloodborne inspired, some Castlevania in there. So, usually with something like this, how I start, since I'm working in Procreate, I have the advantage of using the perspective tool, which, if you don't know, is basically a computer-assisted perspective tool that makes perspective quick and easy, at least usually. If you do have trouble with it, though, I suggest switching freehand to just throwing down some lines and work from there. When starting something like this, the easiest thing to do is just put something down on the screen, because if you just stare at a white screen, you're going to stare at it for a long time. So just make a mark, even if it's not in perspective. You just start sketching, because you can always throw more layers, drop opacity, delete layers. So with digital, it's pretty much endless how much you can work a drawing. So something I'm really thinking about here is the midground, foreground, and background. Ideally, I would have put more in the foreground, something very, very close to the eye, close to the camera, and with that you could even add a slight blur to give the image some more depth. With this one, I'm probably not going to go to color. It's more just a quick concept, just working in some bricks, some line work, things like that. Another thing I started thinking about was my light source. And when doing something that's very geometric like this and has very hard lines, it makes it a lot easier to kind of block in rough values. So if you look at the front of the crypt and the gate, you see it's lighter than the sides, and then the buildings in the background are going to be really dark. And if I were to take this further than a sketch, they would probably be faded out with atmospheric perspective. So that's where things that are far away from you in the background kind of tend to blend in with the sky. And you have to kind of imagine the space in between, and it's not just empty space. There's air, there's moisture in the air, there's reflection of light off of that, so it diffuses things, and it hides things and obscures things. It also adds color into those things. But for this, I think we're going to just stay black and white. I took a random texture brush, just kind of throwed it down to get some more texture and value in there. I could have done that more, probably worked in more texture. It's easier for me anyway to paint out of an object that has a lot of texture in it. So even if the texture's random or doesn't make sense, you can still make something out of it. The hardest part when doing something like this is adding the organic elements like I did with the skull. It's easiest to start with a sphere. And from there, what you want to do is try and find where the center of the sphere would be, and work from there. So if you notice, I have a slight line down the middle of the skull that would be down the middle of the forehead and would go over the nose and the mouth. And it's still slightly off from the chin there, which is something I could fix. So for brushes, I'm using a custom-made thin hard paint brush, and then the wonderful pencil tools that are included with Procreate to add some really nice texture into the piece. One thing I try to avoid is having the work look too clean, like kind of clip art clean, or like something you could throw together in Photoshop without drawing, just using shape tools. I'm adding some hatching. I kind of messed around on the ground there to make it a little bit more like dirt, because it would be such an uneven surface, and that it's kind of surrounding and pulling up into the structure, especially on the walkway there and that side of the fence. And I'm still throwing in some value, just some very, very light airbrush shades, just trying to work out and get a feel for everything. A lot of doing work like this is just trying things. If it works, keep it. If it doesn't, just undo or drop that layer. With the bricks, it's easy to stay too tight to the pattern of what the bricks would be, because real bricks, unless the building was just made, like a week or two ago. Is it's not going to be super clean, which is something that I'm starting to think about while I'm working on this. Where would missing bricks be? You know, where would pieces of the bricks be missing? And that helps with texture, and especially something like this, which is supposed to be old and creepy. You want it to look decrepit, so you want a lot of texture on it. It's kind of like drawing faces. When you draw, a stylized version of a man's face, for example, there's a lot more line work in it than there would be what would be a beautiful woman's face, which would be more just shaped lines. Because the more lines, the more texture you add to it, usually the older or the more worn it'll look. Now I'm kind of going in with that pencil tool, and I've got it in whites, so I'm trying to find those edges where the light would catch, and just that really helps it pop. Usually if I were to finish a piece in this type of style, I would do lots and lots of layers of highlights. You want to think about your darkest darks, your lightest lights. Used another tool that just throws kind of fractal lines down, and using layer select, you'll be able to select that layer, and anything you paint will only go on that layer and won't go outside of it. So with that, I was able to throw down all these scratches and lines using different values, so darks and midtones and highlights again. Added some window lights there. Alright, and that's a quick sketch of a creepy crypt. Didn't spend a lot of time on this one, just trying to get some ideas out there, get warmed up a bit to work on some other things, but would always love a comment and a subscription. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.